Welcome to my Dirt Rally 2 Audi Quattro setup guide. I have tested this setup with a wheel, with a controller, and with different steering wheel settings in terms of degrees of rotation. I've also tested this setup with the different tyre compounds and in different weather conditions to validate that this setup works in every single condition. So before we start, I'd like to mention that this setup was made to cater to the more casual person who's just struggling to control the car or has no idea how to make a setup. Many of the choices I made in this setup were based purely on making the car drivable and stable, and not necessarily to cater to getting the last tenths of second out of this car. So to start off with, let's look at the camber and toe settings. I've had to put a lot of camber on both axles because of the high speed sections. I was getting a lot of oversteer, which was uncontrollable, and so I've had to put a lot of camber on there and toe in on the rear. If you're running a high rotation on your wheel, say 900 degrees, then you'll want to lower the toe angle on the rear to say 0 or 0.2 to toe in. I'd never recommend going toe out on this car. It's already completely uncontrollable as it is. If you're running a low degree of rotation, say 540 to 360, something like that, then you'll want to take 2 degrees of toe in on the rear. For the brake bias, nothing too irregular here, just standard braking force and just slightly more to the front to stop the lockups and to prevent the car from spinning out. You definitely don't want to go anywhere to brake bias rear because you'll just spin out on every single corner. It's of no surprise really with an unstable car like this that most of the differential settings are fully locked. They're maybe not the fastest settings, but they're the most stable. They'll get you to the end of the stage, and crucially in wet weather conditions you won't be spinning out all of the time. This does not mean, however, that you can be just completely gung-ho with the throttle. You know, it's a Group B car. You've got to be really careful, and still the car has a lot of weight compared to the other cars in its class, so you've still got to tiptoe around the corners, but at least it won't spin out all of the time. For acceleration, we've gone 55% torque bias because anywhere to 50% or below, again, you just start spinning out for some reason. So there you go. The gear ratios are completely standard. I spent a lot of time looking over these and trying different settings, but really the gear ratios are fine for the slow speed stuff, and in the high speed stuff, if you're going that fast that you can max out 5th gear, then chances are you're probably going to crash at the end of the straight. Anything past 4th gear with this car is chancy at best. So yeah, the standard gear ratios should be perfectly adequate. As to the damping settings, I'm sure these won't work well in places like Germany, but I made this setup for Spain. You may want to go a bit less aggressive on the rebound, but generally soft damper settings on the bump settings allowed the suspension to just keep stable over the rough sections in Spain, especially at high speed. And finally, to no surprise really for anybody, lowest ride height in Spain. That goes for nearly every single car in the game, and the spring rate has been adjusted just to keep the car stable. Most of the spinning out stuff that you get at low speed was because of the suspension just not reacting well with the road. You'd get a lot of body roll, and then because of the weight of the car it would just spin around. So I've gone really, really firm. I've taken it back 1 from the firmest setting because that created a lot of instability at high speed. I've gone a bit lower on the spring rate because at low speed I had a bit of spin out issues when I had the front spring rate setting the same as the rear, so I've just taken it down a couple of notches. The final testing I did with this setup was to take it on 1 stage and to do 1 run only and to see what time I could get. Now, obviously, as you can see per the leaderboard, there's not a lot of chances that you're going to be breaking any world records with this car. It is quite slow, but it is now enjoyable to drive with my setup, and that was what I was aiming for. So anyway, I got 18th place with my first run, the only run that I did, and there were a couple of mistakes, maybe 2-3 seconds worth. I'm sure I could go faster into certain corners as well, so you can get close. But anyway, it makes the car competitive, so in that case it validates the work that I've done. I hope you've enjoyed watching the video. Feel free to recommend some cars that I can do setups for, or some that you find completely undrivable, so that I can maybe try and do something with them. Finally, please give me your feedback on this setup. You know, if there's something that you think I've done wrong, or some recommendations that you think I should try out, by all means put them down in the comments below. Thank you ever so much, and bye bye.